Good. Honestly, that's amazing news. That's very, very good to hear. Margaret, how it's been for you? How's it been down in Southern California?
Yeah, I have to unmute myself. I do talk to myself a lot, especially with
It's
during
okay.
the pandemic, as somebody that is like the only Muslim in my family. So it's like, a lot of the iftars are by myself or just me and my daughter and but like things are starting to open up and people are meeting socially distanced. Like we've been to a restaurant and went outside and but there's events like this. It's like breaking fast with community virtually on a Zoom call, and that's also been an experience. It's been a beautiful experience because in some ways it has allowed me to connect with people that I normally wouldn't see for a long time, but it's like we kind of normalize meeting virtually. Like we still have people that are still still having sick family members and still worried and getting calls, right? So there are people that are still mourning, but there are people that are still celebrating, like they're gathering and I just got my shot, my first dose today. So I just feel really blessed that we made it. I mean, last year during the last time like the global iftar, which was for me was definitely a light. Like I was with Zahra Bilu and Hatem Bazian, and normally we wouldn't have been able to connect during Ramadan because they would have been busy doing like masjid tours, and they're like such high demand speakers. So it was definitely a highlight for that socially distanced Ramadan. And now that things are opening up, right, that people are starting to socialize more, and there is that hope, right, that we can get through this. And it's still like sort of like a it's like a hope with still deep sadness because we have our brothers and sisters in India like who are struggling, right? We still have people globally that are struggling. And so I'm just seeing a lot of people digging in deep to their pockets to donate and give. So it's like still a lot of generosity and a lot of care as we're grateful to make it through a second Ramadan during this pandemic.
Good. Alhamdulillah. Exactly. Alhamdulillah. Well, you know what? Alhamdulillah, everybody's, found a way, it seems, to, exactly like, be grateful and get through this. Um, is anybody else, if you're here in the audience, if you want to, tell us a little about where you're from and, kind of engage with the speakers, of course, now would be a great time to do it. And of course, if not, then we can go into kind of seeing what the speakers have to say. But, of course, if anybody wants to, it would be a great time. Um, no, no, that's cool. Um, Great. Well, we have three speakers, and inshallah, another one will be joining shortly. All three of them do amazing community work, like really, really cool stuff. I gave you a little spiel of it kind of at the beginning when I was kind of introducing them. But everybody here has been involved in the Muslim community in the United States for a very long time. Everyone here has been doing very, very good work. So I guess, if, to be honest, from any of you three, kind of whoever would feel the most comfortable, kind of talking about what it is, kind of how their journey has been, what it's been like, getting to where they are and working and operating in that environment, and, talking a little bit about their work. That would be great. Whoever wants to go first, really. Yeah, sure.
I can start if you want. To be honest with you, I've been on this journey for 12 years. And as a homeschooling mom and a lecturer and giving all this, I will tell you it's definitely not easy in the US. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of racism towards the Muslim community. And you get to see it more when you travel within the US to places that they don't have a lot of Muslim communities and they're far from it. So we've experienced a lot of it, but it just makes you stronger. It just brings you closer to Allah. It makes you more thankful. And for myself, it's been something that I learn from, I grow from, and I keep thinking, how can I make it even better? And so, you don't quit. That's what you do. And that's what I've taught my kids. You don't quit. You get the death threats. As a speaker, I'm not going to lie. I go to lots of different universities and colleges, and I've had death threats many times, police officers in the crowds. I've had security, and I tell my kids I might not make it out of this, but you don't let this die. You just keep going, keep doing the best. And we're here for a purpose and just make the most out of it. So that's my experience. But alhamdulillah, I'm here and we keep going, and I'm thankful. And like she said, all we can do is make every day our best and help each other, especially everyone that's suffering around the world, whether it's India right now or everywhere else where COVID has hit harder. And just keep it going and not dwell on the little things, and just try to do the best we can for each day we're here.
Yeah. Great, lovely, amazing. No, that's awesome. Zohra, maybe do you want to talk a little bit more about, because of course, you do a lot of amazing consultancy work. You're an author of a great deal of published books. Maybe you would like to talk a little bit more about that, kind of inform the audience, kind of what you've been doing and the impact, inshallah, that of course all your work has made.
Alhamdulillah, my books are in different areas. And I'll be honest, it's kind of when I'm inspired and motivated. I study a lot, I read a lot, and I teach a lot. But, my biggest like goal in this life, my brother, is to please Allah. That's my biggest goal. And that's the biggest goal probably of all the believers, right? But, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he said only 3 things benefit you when you die, that is the purpose of why I write books, why I give lectures, because that's a sadaqah jariyah. The other one being raising righteous kids to make dua for you and to keep that legacy going. That's my second one. And the third one being doing any kind of charity work that's ongoing. So this is my ultimate goal in life, is to do these 3, keep teaching and growing, and, making sure that if my last day comes, and it's going to come for all of us, anytime, any moment, that I've left behind these 3 things. And inshallah, that's what benefits me in the hereafter. So that's really my purpose of all of what I do, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, that's amazing. No, of course. Great. No, that's amazing in terms of the work that you do. I guess if any of the other 2 speakers kind of want to talk, again, same thing, just kind of inform the audience on the work that you're doing and talk about, the work you're doing to help the Muslim community. That would be great.
Yeah, I guess I can, I can kind of jump in. I mean, in this past year, right? I mean, it's been quite a whirlwind from the racial disparities that we witnessed with COVID, right? And then there's other things that we don't know, right? We haven't been able to disaggregate the data to see how hard hit the Muslim community has been, or like South Asians have been faced with COVID, or many of them are in the front lines of the medical industry, right? Or even Arab Americans, because they don't collect that data because how the racial categories, but we know, like, right, it's like that the funeral homes, like I just saw like a recent article, like they were like really backed up, and so we went from that, right, to almost a year ago, like during Memorial Day, May 25th, of witnessing a murder, and that, like, of law enforcement taking 9 minutes of torturing a man till he died, right? And our whole country went, just went out. It was like national uprising, and the incredible demand for anti-racism work. And so, in that time, and it was a deep time of uncertainty for Muslim ARC, as we had to reconstitute new leadership teams and build new teams to work in the different areas. And so many answered the call for racial justice in the Muslim community, and they stepped up and they supported and they uplifted the work that Muslim ARC has done. And that also meant an increased demand for our workshops. And so we were really busy, and and the community, they really supported Muslim ARC, and for us to be able to like reach out to like the masajid and board members and communities, and when my work was honored, I actually and I didn't update my bio, which I got to like on that page, but it's just like, I mean, it was like, I literally like cried when I got like an email, and I was like, I don't know if I could make it, because I had like all these events. I had a scheduling conflict, so I had to be in 2 places at once. And when I got a message from the Council of American Islamic Relations National, and they honored my work as Muslim of the Year, and I don't feel deserving. Like, the only reason why I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this award, and I'm gonna like really speak to my team, the people that were behind us, and all the donors and all the supporters and the Muslims that were out on the streets, saying that Black Lives Matters, right? That are really pushing to address this like mass incarceration system where we've invested so much money as a nation into punitive, right, and to and punitive measures of addressing social ills rather than focusing on like things like feeding people, right, or addressing the root causes of why people commit crimes. And so, I accepted on their behalf, and we continue that work. And in 2021, many of the organizations went beyond the surface level, because there's this deep commitment that comes from our tradition, right? Our first ummah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was anti-racist, like the first one, right? Like we were 1400 years ahead of doing that, and that multiracial, and they didn't have like constructions of race like how we have it now. But we know it's like Salman al-Farsi, right? There were those of African descent. There were different tribes and different folks in that first ummah that were part of like that community and built that. And because of their efforts and their sacrifices, we're here today, and we're able to, like, they passed on this deen. And for me to do this work is really inspired by, like, it's deeply, like, one is like a faith imperative, right, for us to do it, and two, like, a building solidarity, and for me to think about what is the future for our generations, right, as the most racially diverse community, like religious community in this country. It behooves us to be unified, and that we could provide a model for other communities, right? Like, look, we're having these advanced conversations on race that I'm not seeing that other communities are coming together and having that. And so I do feel like really blessed to be in this position, to be able to provide these services and to, like, hold spaces and to be in conversations with such amazing leaders. So yeah, like, I'm doing it really to please Allah, right? Like, like, I'm trying to, like, when, like, I wake up every day, sometimes I don't know what I'm supposed to do, like, as executive director, and anybody that's like kind of been executive director is like, you have to put on all these hats, and I have to pray. Like, I hit that prayer mat at the end of the night, and I'm just like, and I do ask Allah that's pleased with me and to forgive my mistakes. But at the same time, I'm like so, like, sometimes, so, like, it is mesmerizing, but it's also like the problems may sometimes seem so big, or I don't know, and I just ask for guidance. And each day, like, I mean, Allah guides me to be better and better. So I'm still learning and growing, and and just happy to be in community and to continue to do this work.
Amazing, great. No, well, inshallah, you can continue for a very long time, and inshallah, you get great great work done. Like everybody else, the speakers here. No, amazing. Great. Well then, Zahra, if you want to talk about the work you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, Zahra and Zora.
Yeah, sorry.
Zora and Marjorie took the words right out of my mouth. I was doing a program with some youth recently, and the moderator asked, like, what does success look like for you? And I said, it really is just that we have to ensure that Allah is pleased with us. In my work, one of the things I do is I visit a different masjid every night to talk to the community about CARE's work, what's going on with their civil rights and how they can get engaged. And one of the things I ask them for, I ask them for their money, and all of our organizations need money. I also ask them to get involved, but I consistently ask them to make dua for us, because we do all of this work. We work so hard, sleepless nights, death threats, safety and security, community judgment. Like, there's so many consequences for what we do, but we do it in pursuit of Allah's pleasure. And if we obtain that, then nothing else will matter. None of those other consequences are actually impactful. And if we don't, then it's all for nothing. And so I was just really appreciating that came up with Zora and Marjorie's comments also, is Allah's pleasure is first and foremost. So in my work, I'm the executive director of one of the largest care offices in the country, in the United States. And we are an American Muslim civil rights organization. So we were founded by people who said, where's our community power? How do we organize to protect each other? Who defends us when we are attacked? And how do we balance being responsive to being consistently attacked, which we are and have been for decades, even predating 9/11, And then how do we spend time being proactive and building on the offensive? What is the world that we dream of? And so we do a variety of things. We provide legal services to anyone who's facing discrimination because they're Muslim or they're mistaken for Muslim. We also provide immigration legal services, which has been a very cutting edge issue in the United States in the last number of years, following the last president, and even now, as people are seeking, what is my immigration status so that I can be safe, so that I can build a home and a family and know that I won't be taken away in the middle of the night. And we provide all of those services free of charge. We work with the media to ensure that when there's a question of who Muslims are or what do Muslims think, Muslims are actually the ones answering those questions. We do a lot of community education because none of this matters, right? None of this matters if only 3 or 4 of us know about it, whether we're talking about our religious beliefs or immigration law or civic engagement or any of those things. And so that's one of the reasons I go to a different masjid every night. It's actually why I'll have to run off a little bit early today, is to make it to my commitment to be with a local community. And then we work with our elected officials and our community to build those interactions, right? While we need to have more and more people who believe like us, who pray like us, who have the same values as us in office, that is still not the case. And of course, having Muslims in elected office is also not always the solution. Sometimes they are worse for us than those who are not Muslim. And so we need to, walk that fine line, but really building engagement so that we can't say, well, why did they make those policy decisions? Did we call them? Did we ask them? Did we hold them accountable? And did we remove them from office when they didn't do what we wanted? And so we do a lot of different things. And as executive director at our office, I get to work with a team of 20 people, mashallah, who are really committed to serving our region's American Muslims, and also working more broadly cross-regionally to ensure that we aren't just doing our work locally, but we're scaling, we're networking, we're learning, and we are ensuring that everybody can do what they need to.
Yeah, great, amazing. No, that's all amazing. And Dr. Hatim has just joined us now. Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. Oh, you're muted, unfortunately. 1 second.
Not the first time I'm muted. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry, so we were just everybody was just kind of talking about the work that they're doing in the community. Of course, everyone here does amazing community work. So everyone was kind of just telling, how they've been, what they've been doing recently, or kind of, generally. So alhamdulillah, it went very well. For everybody who's watching, just to give a little introduction to Dr. Hatim. So Dr. Hatim Bezian is a co-founder and professor of Islamic law and theology at Zaytuna College. He's also a teaching professor in the departments of Near Eastern and Ethnic Studies at UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, sorry. Dr. Bezian is also on the board of several organizations, including the Islamic Scholarship Fund, Muslim Legal Fund of America, and Muslim Americans for Palestine, of which he is also the founding president. So also, long history of doing very good community work, alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Doctor, I guess if we want to, more or less get right into it, if you're happy with that, everybody again just told us about your work. If you want to talk about kind of some of the work you're doing, whether it's focusing on, of course, the education side, or if you want to focus on the more community work, just kind of, give an introduction, how it's been, how you're doing work in community, what you're doing with the Muslim American community. That would be great.
Well, Jazakumullah khairan. It's a pleasure to be back with you again. I maybe will focus a little bit on the current work on Islamophobia that we have been working on, especially as we have just released our new volume on Islamophobia and gender, which is an area that is heavily understudied and under-theorized, because we often focus only on media discourses, but not how Islamophobia targets the Muslim women in particular, where 80 to 85% of violent attacks, Islamophobic attacks, target Muslim women across different areas, whether you speak in France, UK, Australia, New Zealand, or even in terms of India and the United States. So how to really think of locating Islamophobia in the long history of otherization, racism, and discrimination, while not losing the sense of how to actually also assert the Muslim community ability to empower itself. I know that many approach Islamophobia of just if we could get people to know the 5 pillars, they will actually, Islamophobia will end. Or if you, what I consider to be the fair and lovely approach, which is if you just beautify Islam, then Islamophobia will at least be countered or defeated. Or if we just, increase our engagement in civil society, it's Islamophobia will end. All these areas are important to engage in, but they are not really thinking of what we are dealing with in terms of Islamophobia. Islamophobia is not really about Muslims. It's about the majority that wants to use the Muslims in order to craft its own identity at a time where they feel what you call, they're using the replacement theory, the immigrants and the refugees that are taking over our society, that Western civilization and Eurocentricity is no longer driving the values of our society. So the Muslims fit into what you call the right box at this time, not alone, but they fit into the right box in order to drive wide victimization, in order to assert that what we need is to come and take back our society. But taking it back from who? Right? In essence, taking it back from native populations, from the Black community, from the Japanese, the Chinese, the immigrant, the refugees. And if you add it up, it would actually gives you a long history of how the racial structure operates, where you use a particular group in order to drive this right or this assertion to claim the land, to claim the resources, but also to claim exceptionalism on a global level, which gets us into a whole clash of civilization discourse. Huntington, in page 20 in his book, he says that unless we hate what we're not, we can't really drive of how to love ourselves. So the whole theology is the theology of hate that is at the core of this clash of civilization. And I argue that it actually puts Christian theology on its head, because if Christian theology is previewed on love and the sacrifice in there, if you think about Huntington, is actually saying that the essence of how we drive self-love is by finding somebody to hate. I do recommend for him maybe to go to Dr. Phil or therapy, but unfortunately, when it becomes a driving policy, both domestically and globally, you see the consequences on that. So that just in terms of, I don't know how long do you want me to talk? Don't ever tell a professor to talk, because we're programmed for 50 minutes and an hour and 30 minutes on Tuesday, Thursday. So just tell me what, if it's a conversation, then we could go in that way, inshallah.
Okay, great. No, inshallah. No, that was great. I guess one thing we can do, just because Margaret and Zahra, I believe you guys have to go a little bit earlier, just because it's, of course, Adhan time, and have to leave. So I guess if we want to, kind of open the floor a little bit, just for, a little bit of question and answer. If anybody from, of course, the audience here does have any questions for any of the speakers here, that would be, now's a great time to ask, really. If not, I have questions, so it's okay. Great. No. Okay. So I guess, kind of for all you guys, but again, we'll, Zahra and Dr. Hatem, of course, you guys have a little bit more, so I'll address, you guys specifically in a little bit. But I guess, for Zahra and Margaret, kind of in the spaces that you guys are operating in, and I know you guys all operate, in relatively similar spaces quite a lot of the time. But, kind of really, doing a lot of legislative work, doing a lot of, community work on the ground, so on and so forth. How have, you guys seen, and apologies, of course, this question's kind of like, oh, does that really make any sense? But kind of in the wider discussion now on race and politics and everything within the United States, kind of what's the position of the Muslim American community, and how does the Muslim American community kind of fit into this discussion now? Is it playing a big role? And kind of what's the future, not just of this discussion, but Muslim American community's place in this discussion, sort of thing. You guys get what I mean? Kind of.
Yeah, I guess I can start with the sort of kind of discourses, right? Especially just given the centrality of like Muslims, and like we're hyper visible, right? There's a few hyper visible groups in the United States that are going to be targeted, like Muslim Americans, Black folks, right? Like like and since and a large portion of Muslims are Black, so it's like there's going to be and sometimes like that one of the identities gets erased in that, right? And but like when we think about and I don't know if anybody watched The Verdict and the crowds, the image, but if you look at the image, right, like of last week when the verdict, the Chauvin verdict, I'm butchering his name, but I don't care. But the verdict, and when you look at the sign, right, like what was it behind the scene and the people that were out in the streets, and you see halal food, right, because it's cup foods, right? So it's like now, like in people's kind of burning in their imagery, right, around George Floyd is like halal, right? And not everybody, like if people were watching, like they knew that George Floyd was murdered in front of a Muslim-owned store. But this is also in like Ilhan Omar's district. So Ilhan Omar is one of the first Muslim women that were elected to the House of Representatives, right? So it's like her and Rashida Tlaib, and which in Detroit, which is also a very Black city. It was like her Black constituents were like down for, and that shows like the kind of connections, right, in Detroit. But even just getting back to like the George Floyd thing, and the Attorney General, who is the Attorney General? Keith Ellison, right? And he's Muslim. So like Muslims, like in the biggest story, right? The most, that burned, like just changed everything, right? We were part of that story. Imam Makram also, like at the like his Muslim center, also provided some services to George Floyd. So like we're part, like we're deeply tied to that, and because of that, right, that caused a kind of racial reckoning in a way that I hadn't seen in a long time. I mean, I've read things, whether you have like Quakers who are like anti-racist, like there's some religious groups that were always abolitionists, right? But like for Muslims, like as like compared to other faith groups, like we were like, and ISPU has done a study on it. It's like we're much more likely to have more progressive views about race, right, and have critiques around the administration for being racist. But I think it was like because of like how deep those issues affected us, right, and as a community, we turned inwards to look at how did we internalize anti-Blackness? What were our institutions? Did they represent the plurality of Muslims? Were they representative of the demographics? Were our masajid segregated? And many Muslims wrote pledges, like the institutions wrote pledges to address racial justice, and we were out on the streets, and you could see like the kind of visibility, in Minneapolis too, like the Somali community was out there in the forefront, African Americans, like Arabs, like all, like there was all sorts of Muslims that were out there. And so where we're at with racial justice, I think that from the discussions that were happening, both from a national level to community based, because I mean, compared to the year before, where I mean, in our services, like when we were doing anti-racism trainings, the year before we had about 30, right, and they weren't that deep, but like there were like 30 trainings, maybe they'd be like a little hour workshop, it would be here and there. But last year it was like we did 68. Like, I mean, and these were like, some of these were like long workshops. These were like a lot deeper work, like the questions that were being asked, the work and the changes. Like, so we doubled, more than doubled our workshops, and, more than quadrupled the requests. And sometimes we'd have to compile like we're like, okay, you and you, we're gonna do this all together. And so there, I think as a community, that commitment was there. And and it's not a separate thing, right? Like we know like we are racialized, and that the stakes were so high in the election cycle, right? In the census counts, right? And so getting the vote out, the get out the vote efforts to really push toward for racial justice. So Muslims were part of broad-based coalition work. And and I would actually like defer to Zahra, who's doing the civil rights work, and Hatem Bazian, like in the Bay Area, because I know you also have different angles to talk about where we were at in this year of racial reckoning.
Great question, and Marjorie's perspective is right on it. I would suggest, one other way that I'm thinking about it is that as difficult as the last 4 or 5 years have been, one of the silver linings has been this like urgent wake-up call for immigrant Muslims to get involved, to see the consequences of their apathy and of sitting on the sidelines, to see the consequences of the unresolved anti-Black racism in immigrant Muslim communities, and to see the consequences of not of maybe only giving lip service to activism prior, right? Like we were confronted with all of that in the last several years in a way that we haven't been maybe since the first few years after 9/11. And so in addition to the very difficult and needed conversations and work around activism, I think there's also a lot happening around connecting the dots between so-called Muslim struggles, right, with Islamophobia, and broader social justice struggles around environmentalism and immigration and police accountability, and prison reform and the military-industrial complex, and so much more. There are more and more Muslims that are stepping up and running for office. We haven't seen these kinds of numbers since pre-9/11, and I think even then we've exceeded those numbers, and it's young people. Right? It's not people that are older than me or my age, it's people in their 20s who are saying, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and I'm going to see what happens. And they run for school board and they run for city council and they run for Congress and they win from time to time. And so that's been really exciting. There's also a recognition among our partners and friends that they need to include us, that we will hold them accountable, that we will mobilize against them, and that we will support their opponents. My one note of caution is something that we're seeing right now around a specific political nomination in the US, but I think might be relevant more broadly as we think about how we move forward in terms of civic engagement and representation. Representation is not in and of itself the goal. Tokenization hurts us, particularly when we allow people who identify as Muslim but don't align with us on values to be used as tokens, right? A brown face in the right place is not what we are seeking. And so we need to be really cautious of this, is that as people step up, as people voice their opinions, as people use their Muslim identity, even at times, as political capital, we want to be thinking about what that means, what we expect of them, and how it needs to be more than simply, I call myself a Muslim and so you should support me, or I will be good for the community. Sometimes those people won't be good for the community. And so we need to get more savvy about this and really bring nuance to the conversation that is beyond just, hey, like Muslims are cool, vote for us. And I'm not saying any of us on this lineup would say that, but I want to raise it because I think it's a difficult thing to say, oh, you're Muslim and I'm actually not going to support you this time because you didn't earn my support. You haven't proven yourself to this community.
Right. Yeah, it's good. No, that's both right. That's very good from both of you guys. I actually have a bunch of follow-up questions in my head now, but there's a few of the audience that have their own questions, so I'll defer my questions. We'll see what the audience has to say. I guess we'll start kind of from over here. I guess maybe following up on that, Zahra. One question we have here is, how do we get more people from a South Asian / BAME background to vote? And I guess, how does that happen? And maybe if you want to tie that into, in terms of the relevancy and the how good of a thing this is, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would offer a few things. One is peer-to-peer mobilizing around voting is still what I believe to be the most effective. I've been doing voter mobilization for 20 years now. And, when I think about the email lists we have today versus then, or the television ads, or the candidate forms, honestly, the thing that moves people the most is your friends and family. So if you're voting, make sure you're telling 5 other friends, make sure they're telling 5 other friends, right? I'm not going to vote because somebody sent me an email. I mean, I'm going to send the email, right? Someone who sends the emails, I'm going to keep sending them. But that's not necessarily what moves people who weren't going to move otherwise, right? The emails inform people who were already going to vote. So that's the first thing, is peer-to-peer mobilizing remains one of the most important things that we can do, that ordinary community members can do. You don't need to be an activist. You don't need to lead an organization. Even in my family, right? Like, we check in on each other to be like, did you vote? Did you vote? Did you get in your early voting? Where's your sticker, right? Those kinds of things move people. The second I would say is to think about it as arguably a religious obligation, right? To speak up for justice, to take action for justice as our religion calls us to, and to see that not as something separate or incidental, or, if I have time, but rather I will be asked. Like, I had the privilege of voting when so many other people do not, undocumented people do not, people returning to society from time incarcerated have those rights taken away from them. People who are working low-wage jobs don't always have the ability to get away from work to go vote. So there's so many people who are left out of the equation, and not to mention all of the people abroad, particularly when we're talking about the US and Western countries. People who are impacted by our country's foreign policies do not get a say in what they are and how they are developed. And yet we do. And so I always think to myself, Allah will ask us, like, what did you do? How did you do it? Did you do the most that you can? And so I actually see it as a religious obligation. And then the third and the last thing is actually to move away from thinking about voting as the be all end all. Voting is the bare minimum, right? If it is all I do, in my case, as a US citizen with a roof over my head and food security and a stable job, it is honestly like not enough. It is the least. And if all I do is show up on election day and never, ever, anytime else, never to a protest, never to a town hall, never to a letter writing event, never give money to a fundraiser, I'm not doing enough. And I worry that when people really think about civic engagement as limited to voting, and then they don't get the results they want, they're disappointed, right? And we should remember, of course, that the results are not in our hands, that Allah asks us and requires us to do what we can. We're responsible for the output, not the outcome. That is up to Allah. But still, when we don't get the outcomes we want because we didn't tire a camel, we didn't make the complete effort, we get disappointed. And we're like, oh, I'm not going to vote again. Look at who won. Well, it's like, no, civic engagement is never just about voting. I think often about 2016, I was really excited about Bernie Sanders running for president. It was one of the first times in my voting life, in my adult voting life, that I had been excited about a presidential candidate, because I really can't stand most of the others. And when I decided to, put my little old name behind him and say, I'm going to endorse this man for president, I also bought airline tickets to go to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration, should he win, right? I ended up still going anyways to protest the actual outcome of that. But I said, I'm going to show up and cheer him on and remind him, right? Not just me personally, but like thousands of other people, right? That we put him here and he is accountable to us. And so I tell people often that the most important day for civic engagement is actually the day after the election, right? When you have to get to work to hold people to their promises or plan for the next election.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I guess, following on that, and this kind of, this question can be for everybody, not directed towards one person. We have one question from one of the audience. What are practical solutions we can take as an individual to help our community? And I guess, what I'm kind of thinking that, for me personally, just to add on that, what practical steps can people take in all the different spheres you guys work in? What do you guys think are maybe some of the most, the practical and the most useful, even if they don't seem, big up thing, or the thing that immediately comes to your head, kind of like, okay, what's the most useful thing that you as an individual can do to build on, all the things that you guys have all mentioned?
Well, maybe I could jump in here with a different direction, is that all politics is local and all community building is local. The Prophet ﷺ said that none of you truly believe if their neighbor goes to bed hungry and you're fully satiated. So, and that hadith is so impactful because it goes to every seven, your neighbors in seven neighbors in each direction. For me, that hadith is about what you call social connection for community building, because we often think of the larger picture that we want to have what you call that the revolution is going to be televised, and most likely right now is going to be on what you call social media, but your next door neighbor house is on fire and you just really completely disconnected with it. More importantly, I think, as in the Western context, that we have become accustomed to really being disconnected in how we relate and how we work. So for me, the most impactful thing is that are you able to translate this into meaningful work and meaningful connections in your local arena and your local neighborhood? Does your neighbor call you if there's a problem they have, whether whether it's getting some needed sugar that you ran out, or some rice that you need before you go to the store in general. So these are the things that are impactful. And if you can translate those, then you are able to do the other parts, building these community relations and structures, because it's a collective effort and making those connections that will have an impact on the long run. And I think we have become accustomed to being disconnected and being organized in the abstract rather than in the real substantive and that could be touched and felt.
I agree.
Yeah. Anybody else wanna talk about that, build on that sort of thing?
I guess I would like to build it, and I agree. I think having, focusing on the local, right? So much we don't really understand like how our civil liberties, like that's where you can have like expand the most rights, right? Like in your city, right? And it expands in your state. And so, like in certain, some counties have like the most progressive, right? Like, like as far as like laws, like as far as making sure that folks who are working have rights, and some states are much more progressive in protecting rights than others. And then, so I think that's so important is one, I think that we have to think about this in stages of like how, like some practical steps that we should really learn is getting our political education. But like, where do we get that, right? Learning through organizations that are doing that kind of work. Like we really, like, one, the demographics of Muslims in America would not have changed if you did not have folks going out and doing like just mass education for people for voting rights in the civil rights movements. They were going to sharecroppers to share stories, right? So like the first stage is, right, is like learning, sharing the stories, right? So we have to get the in that mass political education led to the mass movement that we know of, like of the civil rights movement. And from there, we had the Voting Rights Act, and then that led to eventually like the Immigration Act, which opened up and allowed for people coming from non-European countries to actually become and get citizenship, when that was like there's so many pathways to stop that. So it's like we benefited from regular people, poor folks, oppressed folks, from getting that political education. So the first step is like getting educated, right? Learning. The second one is like when we have to think about where are resources. Resources aren't just money, but even though like money is a big factor, and especially if you don't have the time to give, you can even, like, even if you don't have a lot, you could pool money. You can go and ask people like, hey, I'm doing a fundraiser for these people that are ensuring our civil rights, who are ensuring our human rights, who are working to protect the environment. You can start to pool money together, doing a fundraiser. There's so many creative things that you could do as a stay-at-home mom. I started Muslim Arc as a stay-at-home mom. Like now I'm like career woman, fly all these different places and everything. But there's so much that in civil society that that regular folks do. So, you know, the areas that we can consider careers, if you're a bright person and you understand business, right? Running a nonprofit is like running a business. Like, don't just think the only career that you could have is as, you know, a doctor or engineer. That, you know, go for a PhD in education, you know, or business administration or nonprofit administration, in philanthropy, right? We need the whole ecosystem. So be okay with your children even taking those careers, because it's not that bad. It's like, it's
A'udhu
actually
billah,
really
a'udhu
beautiful.
billah, right? For someone that came in this
Yeah,
chat.
like, so just like, I know, like, I mean, but I mean, if my daughter's going to go into this work, I'm like, you do your best, right? And you get the education and the skills. So you're the nonprofit management, or if they're going into politics, like, they're bringing their best, right?
Mhm.
So I think being open that you could work, you know, in social change, that there's careers in this. And you know, or if you don't want to work, you have your career and you're set, volunteer if you have a few hours, right? Volunteer. There's lots of opportunities, especially now virtually, or even the day of, to spend some time working with the organizations, because as you get to know them, you'll build a second family, right? And sometimes you just may even provide some relief for input. Join a board, learn to be a good board member. We need good board members, right? Like, so there's so many areas that you could be involved, from committees to volunteers. And finally, like, just as a reminder, you know, we have to redistribute. We have to think about our giving, annual giving, for those of us who are getting older, or even thinking about our wills, thinking about, like, okay, what are we going to pass on? We should obviously pass on to our children, but thinking about for posterity, right? That Sadaqah Jariyah could be in those organizations of giving to endowments, starting down endowments, and let's think like very creatively around that. So each of those are like ways that we can escalate up, but it's sort of like opening up our mind. And we really should think about, as far as like, this is not just giving to help other people, but this is giving to ourselves. This is giving to our souls, and thinking about how we could support. There's so many resources that we have to offer, our expertise, our money, and our time, that, you know, in different stages of life, that we could support the work.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. No, that's great. Does anybody else wanna you know, talk about it? But you know, of course, that was great from both of them.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, great. In that case, so we'll have a few more questions. Let me just get through these. Actually, one thing is, I guess, you know, we have one question here from one of the audience members. How do you introduce social justice into our spaces, as introduce it in a way to everybody without forcing or polarizing anybody? So again, I guess, you know, kind of building on what was just said, you know, of course, about, you know, local work and, you know, reaching out and so on and so forth. What would you guys say, again, you know, whether this is relatively open or whether this is, you know, again, you know, sorry, Dr. Hatem and Zohra, just because you guys are here for longer, sort of thing. But you know, of course, for Margaret and Zahra, you know, if you guys want to talk about that in your spaces, and how, you know, how do we introduce these discussions maybe more into the Muslim community, sort of thing. It's up to you guys.
And I think that storytelling is such a great way to make these connections, right? I was talking to a family member recently about the crisis with migrants coming across the U.S.-Mexico border. And by crisis, I mean the crisis that the United States has created in their countries, forcing them to flee, and then the inhumane conditions we put them through when they seek safety. And, you know, the conversation was around what does it take for a family member to send their child on this arduous journey? Because it is so unbelievable, I think, for many parents who have the privilege of raising their kids in the United States, and middle class and upper middle class backgrounds, generally safe, to think of parting with your children in this way. And so it was the story of some children that brought this person in, and then connecting that to the stories in our tradition, right? Even if the one that we talked about in that context was Musa alayhi salam's mother, and sending him away as a baby, right? To be like, what we are seeing, what we are experiencing is not unique to these circumstances. There are long histories behind these kinds of things, or examples that we can parallel. And so I think storytelling is a really important way to bring people in. The other two things I would offer is giving people, to the context of like local action. I would also say incremental action. And so it can be a lot to be like, well, Zahra has to raise like X $1 million per year, or, Marjorie is always on a plane to a different part of the country. And like Dr. Hatem and Zora have published, X number of books, right? Like that's a lot for an ordinary person to think about. But, could I find 5 friends to give $100 each? Could I find 2 friends to come to a protest with me? Could I find 10 friends to write letters to prisoners or elected officials? When you start to make it that easy to do, and easy will really vary, right? But to start with like good recurring actions, which is also something our tradition teaches us. I find that we can bring people in. And so I sometimes have to check myself to be like, okay, who am I going to ask for $20,000? Because I know people that can write that check, right? And they're few and far in between in my age range still, but they exist. Who am I going to ask for $100? And who am I going to ask for 5, right? Who am I going to say, hey, can you organize the protest? Versus, can you make the banner? Versus, can you just show up for like 20 minutes, an hour? And so incremental action. So storytelling, incremental action. And then I think the third thing, and something that we lean into a lot at CARE, is we have the incredible blessing of our masajid, right? So one of the reasons I'm so excited about, the numbers shifting in the pandemic and us making some progress and people getting vaccinated is because we have captive audiences at our masajid, right? So these are people who are already making the effort to engage the community, to act on their faith. And so they are ripe and willing. We just have to go to them and engage them. And so people ask me, like, why do you spend so much time in the masajid? Obviously, I know there are many, many Muslims who don't go to the masajid, and we want to find ways to have them feel included. But, my local masjid will have tarawih tonight, and even social distanced with masks, with, not everybody is fully vaccinated. Like they've got to bring their own mats and they've got to pray on the concrete. They'll still get over 1,000 people. And so tapping into those crowds, I think can really help us move towards mass action.
Marjorie, do you want to say something just before we have the first adhan?
Gosh, I mean, yes, all of that. That was just so beautifully said. So I don't know like what I could like just add, but just, like I think that we should really think about like small, consistent actions that are manageable, and get very comfortable in that, and just keep asking Allah to like purify our actions and accept, and just really tie our work, right? It's like, like the outcomes, like we don't own the outcomes, but really it is like how we are as a community together and showing up with like mercy and care. Just Zahra, like you just really blew me away with the Musa story. That's the first time I've heard that, and that's such a profound story and archetype of like this is what parents are doing, right? And so thank you for sharing that. I'm learning so much from my other panelists, right? And just it's making me more deeply committed to like my faith and my own practice in this Ramadan. Like when, I'm thinking about like Tarawih, like my tahajjud and my du'as, like for everyone here in this space, and that we could come together and do this good work. And, and I truly believe that like we were all made, we were created before, and we were in, like in that time before together. And I pray that we'll be reunited in Jannat al-Firdaus, inshallah.
Inshallah, ya Rabb. Inshallah, Ameen. Great, amazing. Well, thank you very much for the guys. So just for the audience and everybody, we're going to be playing the first adhan. Of course, stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, inshallah. Just because we're going to play the first adhan, of course, for Southern California. And here we go.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت، ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Great. Lovely. Jazakallah khair. Of course, I believe Zahra definitely has to leave, and of course, Margaret, if you have to leave and eat, that's totally understandable. But of course, if you want to stay and chat, that's great too. Awesome. I guess to be honest, we can more or less get right back into it. And next question, for you, Zahra, is, of course, we were just talking about the importance of storytelling. And I was thinking maybe if you wanted to kind of relate that to, of course, all the great work that you do, and in terms of maybe talk about the impact that your work has done also in, raising awareness and building links and, strengthening kind of people's consciousness of these issues.
Is it Zora or Zahra? I just
Zora, you, sorry.
No, that's okay, because,
I mess up.
very close. SubhanAllah, so I think, something like they were saying earlier, we start off small, and the way I look at life is you start off with yourself, and then you take it with your family, and then you build with your extended family, then you go to the community, and then you keep extending bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how I look at every project I work on as well. So if you're doing something like I always say, if I'm not a good mom to my kids and I can't raise my kids right, I don't need to be teaching the community. I need to start at home and build outwards. So I think this is a point I'd like to hit on for everyone out there. Start with yourself, start in your own home, and then slowly build out and, take these little steps, but build on that, because there's no point if you're changing the world, but your own child is suffocating from it. And it's something we need to work on. And I see a lot of us suffering from this. So this is number one. Number two, I'd say, when you're working on the projects and, share it with your kids, share it with your family members, let them see it, because, there's three types of people in this world, right? People who make things happen, people who watch things happen, people who wonder what happened. And we need to be the ones who are making things happen, but we need to share that with our kids and show them that they too can do it. So they're not going to be just like us. Our kids won't be. And I've learned that the hard way. I'm telling you, as a homeschooling mom, I'm like, all right, you're going to do this. And they're like, no. And I'm like, why not? They're like, because I'm not you. I'm like, okay, so what will you do? So whatever dreams or goals our kids have, and this is what Sister Marjorie said, mashallah, and we need to hit this big as Muslims, is whatever dreams and goals your kids have, so long as it's halal, it's within the Sharia, support them. Let them do it. Let them get big and let them be the best at it. And really, when we're going to affect people the most is going to be when we are the best. So if we are the best ourselves and we work on ourselves, then our neighbors will see it. Our coworkers will see it. Our audience will see it. Our readers will see it. Everyone will see that. So when we work on ourselves first, then we expand out. And like the doctor said, mashallah, do our neighbors know us? If we're going to say no, our neighbors don't know us, we have a lot of work to do. Before we go out to our social media platforms, let's get to know our neighbors. Let's get to let them feel comfortable with us and be that. And I'll tell you just one short story with this, because I think it's so empowering. When I moved into a new community, I go and knock on my neighbor's doors, take some food. I'm the one that goes and introduces myself. And one time I went to literally my next door neighbor, and she didn't open the door, and it was me and my kids, and I took some, and she's like, no, I don't want it. I said, oh no, I'm not selling anything. I just moved in next door. I just wanted to introduce myself. I bought over some food. She's like, no, I don't want it. And I was like, okay. Now I couldn't see her because she was talking through a screen door, but it was very dark and I couldn't, I was trying to see who I'm talking to, and I said to myself, I said, if this neighbor knocked on my door in the middle of the night, I wouldn't know who she is. I don't know if I'd open the door. Now, when I did this, I got to meet like 5-6 neighbors. One evening, maybe 5-6 days down the road, one of the neighbors got locked out of his house. He went knocking on the neighbors' doors. No one opened it except us, because I got to meet him. He came in, it was cold. He got locked out. He thanked me. He used our phone. He waited in our house. I offered some food. I mean, this guy was so thankful. Now, I couldn't have done that had I not met him, because I wouldn't know is really my neighbor or not, right? So it's so important for us to know our neighbors and get to know them and be there for them, whether they're Muslim or not, and show them really what Islam is about by our actions, because this is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ taught us, because that's what we build on. And that one person, knowing me, then he's going to tell his family and his friends, oh, it was my Muslim neighbor that, and that's how Islam gets to be what it is, because it's through our actions. And so start off small and just get to know your neighbors and your schoolmates, your coworkers. Get to know them. It's okay. Open up with people and let them see who you really are, inshallah.
No, that's amazing. And actually kind of related to that. And, of course, at least in my head, this is kind of like, a big topic is, of course, the issue of parenting, right? And, of course, there's always been challenges, but there's for a lot of people in the Muslim American community. I'm not American, I'm Canadian, I'm from Toronto, but it's kind of similar sometimes.
Similar.
A little bit, but
Same settler
kind of.
colonialism.
No, so kind of like, in terms of bringing up, children again in this environment, but of course also, in any Western environment, what do you guys think are like, the main challenges of that? What do you think would be some of the main challenges? And relating to that, what you just said, Zohra, in terms of, basically ensuring that we're instilling those Islamic values in the children from a young age. What would you think are maybe some of the main challenges, and maybe, relating it to all the other things that, everybody else has talked about?
SubhanAllah, being a homeschooling parent, it's like the umbilical cord is still attached to me. It hasn't been cut off yet because I don't get a break. It's like 24/7. There's no vacation, holidays. They're always with me, alhamdulillah. So that being said, I think it's very important to raise them with the values of the deen. That's why I chose to homeschool. I went to public school all my life. I've been here since I was a refugee, 6 years old in America. So I know what public schools are all about. And I chose to take a different path to give them something more than what I had. And so when I decided to homeschool, it was really to build them on who Allah is, what is our religion, what we do, and to show them that, be comfortable in your skin. And so people always go, oh, when you homeschool them, you separate them, they don't know society. I said, no, you actually give them the confidence, you build them. So all of my children, mashallah, they graduate high school at the age of 13 and start university. Now, some parents may not like that, but that's to them, to each their own. The way I look at it is I'm raising men and women, not boys and girls. I'm raising a generation where all of my kids, mashallah, between them have authored 15 books. They're international speakers. They've got black belts in Taekwondo. They do lots of stuff. So I'm raising leaders to go out there and say, okay, what are you going to do? Now, they're all going to do it in their own individual way. They're not going to be like me, but whatever path they take, inshallah, they have a strong foundation of who they are and what they want to do. One of my sons tells me, Mom, I'm going to be a YouTuber and I'm just going to give dawah through YouTube. And I was like, yay, I'm so excited. Okay, you be you, inshallah. Just be the best here. So it's knowing that they have the foundation, that they know what they're doing, that they're true to themselves. They've got the virtues of morals and values, and they don't lie and steal and cheat. And I've told my kids this. I said, you commit a sin, like you commit a crime. I said, and I find out you've committed a crime. If I don't take you to the police station and I don't turn you in and I don't testify against you, I am not your mother. I said, that's the kind of mom I am, because I did not raise you to do that. And our religion does not teach that. So when you go on and do it, just remember what side I'm going to be on. And my kids were like, yeah, right. I think we'll have more mercy from the judge and everyone else than my mother. So it's so imperative that as parents, we become role models and we try to do our best, but we teach this to our kids from an early age to do the right thing. I tell them, if you lie, I'll be, I will be angrier than if you told me that. If you told me the truth, yes, you'll have a consequence. But if you lie, it's double the consequence. Don't lie. So you teach them this from the home. And the foundations come from the religion. It comes from the teachings of the Quran, from what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. It comes from the deen. It doesn't come from me. So build on it. And then, subhanAllah, whatever they face, inshallah, they can handle it. Inshallah.
Inshallah. No, that's amazing.
So much.
Sorry.
So great advice. My little one is like, okay, feed me, and so I'm gonna go into my mom mode. So jazakallah khair. Thank you for the wonderful advice, Zahra. I look forward to following your work and being a better mom while I'm doing this movement work. See, she popped in, so she wants her Walaikum salam.
Thank you very much. Honestly, it was great having you. Salam.
Walaikum salam.
That was great. No, and yeah, that was great, Zahra. 100%. I guess, Dr. Hatim, one thing I'm personally, kind of wondering, and of course, Zahra, if you want to talk about this as well, kind of the spaces you guys operate in, how, what would you guys say are some of the main challenges, Dr. Hatim, if maybe you want to talk a little bit about academia, in terms of being, obviously practicing Muslims, where Islam is the focus of your guys' life and the work you do and everything that, it's who you are. How much pushback have you guys seen maybe because of that in the spaces you operate in? You guys know what I mean?
Well, uh, maybe the question could be divided into a number of areas. I think because the area I work on is highly, highly contested. So I work on Palestine, and you can't get more contested than that. I work on Islamophobia, which is also very, very contested. I teach the subject of Middle East Islam, right? So aside from being practicing Muslim, you are dealing with an area that is under the microscope constantly, and you have many antagonists that are well funded. We need, at least from both the pro-Israel funding to the Islamophobia industry, which is we're dealing with about 114 different groups that are all funded to the multi-million dollar that is targeting all the work that we do. And then the Middle East, Islam in general also is within that area. So what you're going to have the pushback, you're going to have the challenges, but the key is that you have to find allies that you work with, and you develop your at least nods of impact and influence. In academia, you're not going to get anybody, like everyone, to be with you, but you have to craft an area where you could create colleagues that work with you on similar topics, similar concerns, and then you can try to make an impact. Your major impact is on the future generation of the students that come and study with you. I just recently looked at, I was doing my academic analysis, and the number of students that have come through my classes is close to about 9,000 students. And I do keep in contact with a large number of these students, whether they need letter of recommendation or they come back, visit, bounce ideas, and so on. So that's an impact that you could actually is tangible, that you have to balance the distractions, the challenge, the lack of, let's say, conference invites. But again, some conferences you don't want to be there because the gatherings, again, if you want to be into a gathering that often is recycle the same nonsense, by all means, it's just, they take place almost on a daily basis. So you have to make sure that you are a person that is trying to make an impact. And I would say that within the area of Islamophobia in particular, that now we have created almost a field of study with a cluster of people that have came together to create that space. Without university support for the most part, without institutional support to the level that you would possibly have in other arenas. But it is because it's an academic field with a cause. It is not for you to get what you call that affirmation from academia or those who are custodians of the canon and with problematizing the canon itself. So I think that you have to do that. As far as you're being a practicing Muslim, for me, that just, I'm a practicing Muslim. If somebody can't deal with that, then recommend a therapist for them. That you should not accept to be the therapist of people that have committed themselves to being closed-minded, that there is something called Muslim and they're practicing and they see the world in different ways. So, and I think often we begin to try to cater to people's attitude and perceptions and negative reactions. And in this sense, we undermine our own ability to have sovereignty of our own self and our own practices as Muslims. And this is, again, not to go out and you're trying to fight everyone. It just says, here what I am. If I don't tell you that you're X, Y, and Z, why do you come and knock on my door and to say, I don't like this? I said, does my door say that I'm a therapist for anyone that has a problem with Islam? Right? If my door says that, then you knock it. If it doesn't, then, I am not in here. I often say to people, I'm not in here to actually solve colonial questions, because for me, a question about Islam is a colonial question. And in the same way that you don't knock on my next door neighbor who's teaching biblical study and you actually knock on them and say, I have a problem with the field that you are engaging in, I have a problem with the Catholic Church. I don't see my next door neighbor in the college. Actually, they might have a debate and discussion in the classroom, but nobody knocks on their door with that question, meaning Islam is a question, a Muslim is a question. The question is only if you actually give it recognition and you begin to answer it. Once you begin to answer it, then you have lost your sovereignty over yourself and your sovereignty about Islam and Muslims and so on, whether in a university or any other setting. So what we need is to really understand your point of departure. The other has to adjust to who you are. You don't adjust who you are based on the attitude, perspectives, or the desires of some people, of some individuals, academic or otherwise.
Wow, that's amazing. No, that's very, very good. And we only have a few more minutes left to the adhan. But Zohra, of course, if you want to, again, maybe build on that, talk about some of the challenges you've, come across. You, as you said at the beginning, some very serious challenges, and how you, keep strong through.
SubhanAllah, and Dr. said it very well, mashallah. Speaking at colleges and universities, you get all sorts of people there at the events. And this is like, keynote speaker or whatever you call it, for 1 hour, 60 minutes, an hour and 40 minutes. But being there, I will have my hecklers in the room standing up and just trying to make a seed. And you just have to learn, like the doctor said, you have to be in control of the situation, number one. But you have to be very confident in who you are and what you're doing and where you are and in your skin, so that you're not insulted, you're not affected, you're not worried. Like, I was walking one day with my daughter and my two cousins' daughters that were walking, and these guys walked right by us in San Francisco, and they're like, "Oh, take those towels off your head." And I turned around and I looked, I said, "Oh, you don't like the color?" And I just kind of like threw a joke off. So you just kind of throw it off and not be worried, I mean, I was in Palo Alto at Stanford. I was going to Stanford Hospital because I had a brain aneurysm a few years back, and I was going for a second check, because I got out of Kaiser, and my sister said, "Let's stop at IKEA and let's just, get like fresh air before you go to the hospital again." I said, "All right." So now I am like with morphine, I'm buzzed, I've got a brain aneurysm, and I'm walking slowly through IKEA, and this guy walks by and his wife is pushing the shopping cart. They're in their 50s, white Americans. And he goes, "Oh my God, look, there's a terrorist coming up." And because I was high on morphine and I just kind of looked at him and I said, "Thank you, sir, for your nice words." And I just kept going. And my sister is like, "What'd you thank him for? What did he say?" I said, "Oh, he just called me a terrorist." And mind you, I wrote a book called "No, I'm Not a Terrorist," right? But point being, there's times where you just have to make fun of it. You just have to relax. You have to know who you are. Don't get offended. Don't be upset. There's a lot of ignorance out there, and I don't blame every single person. Sometimes it's the media, sometimes it's the TV, sometimes it's what they read in the news, sometimes it's how they were raised. And you just have to give people a chance and just let it go. And our job is, for me personally, is if I can make a difference by showing who we are by our actions and answering those questions. I do answer the dumb questions. I won't lie. When I'm sitting in the plane and people start saying, "How come your people go doing this?" I will get in that conversation. I'll say, "Well, how come your people go doing this?" And we go back and forth. But I do it very politely. I have fun with it. I enjoy it. And by the end of the time, we've exchanged email addresses. I send books out. So it's just a matter of being comfortable in your skin, being confident in who you are and what's your purpose in this life. And to be honest with you, I always tell my kids, it's funny because every time they tell me you're going to die, I'm like, all right, I'm going to meet Allah. Like, I'm just all excited, like, Mufti Menk, you better be ready for my janazah salah, and I get all, and my kids are like, "You just want to leave us." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just ready. When Allah says it's time. Like, I'm not going to fight this, So if you're comfortable with who you are, you're going to be comfortable with every moment of your day. You just do your best. You're going to have everything come to you, because Allah tells us, He's promised us, the closer we get to Him, the more difficult our tests will be. And we have to be prepared for that mentally, emotionally, physically. Tests are coming. So how we handle them, it's going to be up to us. And the best way to handle them is with patience, and how the Prophet ﷺ taught us. The more we know our deen, the easier it'll be, inshallah.
Inshallah. Amazing. Jazakallah khair for that. That was great. And everybody, of course, it's the adhan time now. So we're just going to play the adhan for everybody, inshallah.
Inshallah.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of our event now, everybody. So of course, Dr. Hatem had to leave, but of course, Sister Zahra, thank you so much for coming. Honestly, massively appreciate it. It was a great event. honestly, genuinely, it was really, really good. And it was, you know, great talk, and we learned a lot. I certainly learned a lot. I know inshallah everybody else did. I'm pretty sure they did 100%. No, so honestly, jazakallah khair. And of course, you know, just before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you again, of course, to Islam Channel, our media partner this year, and also to the Arts Council UK for making this event possible. And again, you know, you can read more about how we are fighting world hunger with Islamic Relief at iruk.co/RTP. And just before we leave, also, I just want to remind everybody, I guess, that of course, Ramadan is the month of charity and giving. So we wanted to encourage you to support the Ramadan Tent Project and help us continue our work. Your support is vital to keeping us going. And inshallah, as the world transitions back to normality, you know, we can get our in-person events back up and running, you know, after the pandemic's over, obviously. But also, you know, keeping events like this going, right? This was a great event. It was done by Zoom, and we need your support in order for it to keep going. So please check out the links in the chat box, inshallah. And any amount that you guys can donate is greatly, greatly appreciated. So yeah, jazakallah khair, and thank you everybody for coming. And inshallah, whoever's having iftar, have a great iftar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.